Hello, my avid fans of scary and mystical stories. Today I'm going to tell you a tale you've never heard anywhere, only here and now, so enjoy it while you can.
So this happened to me a couple of years ago when my now husband and I were living in a townhouse in a pretty decent area. My husband was working third shift as a corrections officer at our local corrections facility, and I was working as a waitress. It was an unusually warm night for mid-March, so I took advantage and decided to take my husband's 80-pound Alaskan Malamute Siberian Husky mixed dog on a quick walk around the neighborhood near our complex. We get to the end of the street that leads into the complex we live in, and across the street is a Marathon gas station. I notice as the dog, Luke, stops to relieve himself that there's a guy across the street at the gas station with a case of beer in his hands. I have my phone out texting a friend and looked back up to notice the guy was near the stop sign, also relieving himself on the sign. I felt really awkward and instantly put my phone away and lead Luke down the street on our path. At this point, I think this guy noticed us and he crossed the street to where Luke and I had just been. I hear him walking a few feet behind me and just keep my head down staring at my phone with Luke glued to my hip. After about 10 seconds, I hear this guy's steps getting closer. Luke realizes there is someone behind us and he stops in his tracks. Mind you, he is a big dog compared to my 5'2" self, but I can handle him pretty easily, and he is very well trained by my husband. But I noticed his ears were perked up and his tail was straight up. I was glad that he was aware of our surroundings, but I still wanted to keep moving and away from this guy. I just got a weird feeling. This guy finally catches up, so I tighten my grip on Luke's leash and pull him closer to me and step into the grass to allow this guy to pass us and keep Luke out of his way. Does this guy keep going and pass? Nope. When I thought he was about to pass us, I stuttered out a small apology because Luke was pulling on his leash a little to investigate this guy, and most people did get intimidated by him just by his size. He is massive for a dog in my opinion. The guy stops and just stares at me for a minute, long enough for me to smell the cigarettes and booze rolling off of him, and to notice he is probably in his mid to late 20s, dark hair, scruffy looking, and just dirty. He smiles and then finally seems to notice Luke trying to get at him and asks, "Cute dog. What's his name?" Instead of making up a name, I said Luke. He then proceeds to ask me if he can pet my dog, and before I can even give him an answer, he leans down to start petting Luke's head. Luke did not like that. Luke jumped at him as a warning and the guy backed up chuckling. I apologized and mentioned that he was very protective and made up a lie that he was trained as my dad's former canine unit. My dad is a software developer. Instantly, I saw this guy's face change. I don't know what to call it, but he looked a little put off by it. He asked me what my name was and I gave him a fake name. He then asked if I lived around here and I said I was visiting a friend of mine for the weekend. He then made a sudden step towards me, and I'm not lying when I say I have never heard my husband's dog growl in the 5 years I have been with him. But the sound that came from my dog sounded like something from nightmares. Luke's hair was spiking on his spine, and he was throwing himself up on his back legs and kicking his front legs at this guy. He had put himself completely between myself and the guy and was snapping at him. This freaked the dude out so much he stumbled backward, nearly dropping his beer. He quickly said, "Well, have a nice night, cutie," and stumbled off down the road. When I say my heart was pounding, it was deafening. I grabbed Luke's leash so hard and sprinted between the buildings until I got back to my townhouse and locked all the doors and collapsed by the front door. Luke was in my face the whole time, kissing me and whining. This dog is the sweetest and most gentle creature I have ever met, and hearing him growl and seeing him react the way he did made me realize that I needed to get out of that situation real fast. It was late summer and I was coming home from hanging out at the beach for my best friend's birthday party. When I got off the subway at my stop, I looked at the bus arrival screen. The bus I would normally take home was arriving in an hour. Being a tired 14-year-old girl, I decided to take an alternate bus route home. This was a decision I would later regret. When I get off the bus at the stop, I have about a 10-minute walk to my building. My area at night is pretty quiet, not many cars on the streets. As I'm walking up the street, I hear the sound of an engine nearby. I look over my left shoulder and see a white panel van, I know how typical, rolling up the street. I tried to think nothing of it, but when I turn onto my street, the van does too. Now I'm unsettled and start walking faster. This van is driving slowly and it never passes me. When I turn up the long driveway to my building, the van once again turns too. Now I'm scared. The driveway to my building has an ice rink on the side of it with bright lights. So I walk beside the rink under the bright lights. There are small townhouses on the other side of this driveway. The van catches up to me and stops, so I think maybe this person is lost and trying to ask for directions. I was trying to find some way to rationalize this. I stop and stay about 4 feet from the van just in case. I look in the van window to see an older man, starting to bald with black hair and a white t-shirt. I ask if they are lost. They don't respond. Instead, they try to get me into their van. I say no and start walking, but the van continues to drive slowly, following me. When a red car begins to drive down the driveway, the van drives all the way to the end of the driveway and waits for the red car to turn out before reversing to be beside me again. The man is still trying to get me into the van. I want to make a mad dash to my building, but I'm worried he will see where I live, so I keep walking. When another car comes down the driveway, the van does what it did before, drive to the end and wait for the car to leave. But this time there is a cab dropping someone off at the townhouses. The cabbie is closing his trunk when he sees me. "Are you okay?" he asks. I tell him how the van has been following me, and every time a car comes, the van drives to the end and waits for it to leave before following me again. The cabbie tells me he will get in his car, drive to the end of the driveway and sit there for a bit so I have enough time to run to my building. I tell him okay and thank you. The van is back in line with me again, so the cabbie gets in his cab and drives up the driveway. The van follows. I look and see the two vehicles sitting there. I run up the rest of the driveway into my building's lobby. My heart is racing. When I get to my apartment, I'm still freaked out. I go into my room and call the cops. While I'm on the phone with the cops, I look out my bedroom window and see the van. It's slowly driving around my building looking for me. Now I'm fully panicking. The cops send officers to sweep the area, but they don't find him. 2 officers came to my apartment to get a statement from me. About a week after this happened, the officers come back to my apartment. They show me a photo of the man from the van that they were able to get from the security camera on the side of my building. I told them the man in the photo was the one that followed me. They told me they found him and that he was being put on the sex offender list. I'm a female and live in a fairly small town. Most of the time I feel pretty safe doing things on my own. I have a house full of kids, so grocery shopping on my own is a rare occurrence for me. One night in particular, I was out by myself and headed home semi-late. I was alone, so I called my husband to let him know I was going to run into the store for a couple of things. I get there, and because of the time, it was pretty empty. Just a few stragglers here and there for a late-night snack. I had a recipe in mind for the next day and only needed a few scattered items. As I went down the aisle for the first thing on my list, I passed a man, probably in his 50s, who was shopping alone. I stepped out of his way and smiled, just being polite. Like I said, small town, didn't think much about it, as I do it all the time. My next item was several aisles away, so I got what I needed and carried on. I get to my next item, and as I look up, I see the same man again. Not looking at the shelves, but directly at me. Still wasn't overly concerned, but I thought it was odd. I make my way clear across the store to the dairy section. I had a couple things on my list from this part of the store, so I was there for a few minutes. I look up and there he is again, looking directly at me. At this point, I'm feeling nervous, so I decide to trust my instincts. I went to the main aisle leading to the front and walk straight ahead as if I'm leaving the store. I glance back about halfway to the front, and sure enough, there he is. So I keep going, picking up my pace. I get all the way to the front, and then decide to grab one last thing, thinking that surely he'll just carry on now, as it would be too obvious to turn around and follow me. I get what I need and look around. Nowhere in sight. I head to the register and breathe a sigh of relief, until I get there. This store has several self-checkout lanes. I go to one, look up, and he's standing at the front of the store. Hasn't checked out yet. He looks as though he's waiting for someone else, which is what I'm hoping. I start to scan my items, and then it gets really creepy. He pulls his cart around and goes to the station directly behind me. I have about 10 items, and he had maybe 5. Only the top part of his cart even had anything in it. I'm moving slower now, trying not to panic and hoping he'll just finish and get out. Then I realize something and I feel relief. All I have is my checkbook, which means a manager has to check me out because the self-checkouts only take cash and cards. I call one over and get her help. Now she has to suspend my entire order and move it to her register, and I have to fill out a check. More than enough time for this guy to finish what he's doing and be gone. But he manages to slow down and wait until I'm completely done. By this time, I'm visibly shaken and trying to stall until he leaves. He sees this and leaves by the opposite door, meanwhile watching me the whole way. I stayed right where I was and waited for 2 other families to finish checking out. I put my keys in my hand and all my bags on my arm. As soon as they walk out, I walk right beside them, unlock my car, and get in with all my bags. No way I was stopping to put the bags in the back. I immediately lock the doors, look up, and see him just getting into his truck the next aisle over, directly in front of me. I start the car, and am on the other side of the parking lot before he can even start his truck. I took a long way home in case he saw where I went, but I never saw him after that. I'm just thankful I noticed him when I did and didn't take my sweet time, especially in the parking lot. And also, I don't shop alone at night anymore.